Did you know that we could be experiencing the worst global humanitarian crisis in human history? And most people don't know about it. Did you know that a majority of the world's population has been affected by this crisis? And we're not talking thousands or millions or even hundreds of millions of people. We're talking about billions of people being affected. It's difficult to imagine this many people affected by a crisis, but we can begin to understand by imagining what 1 billion people looks like. To give us a frame of reference, we can picture the inhabitants of North and South America. Together, these two continents are populated by just over 1 billion people. So how are people being affected by this crisis? Over 1 billion people are infected with a sexually transmitted disease. Over 1 billion women have been physically or sexually abused. Over 1 billion individuals are addicted to pornography. In the past generation, over 1.5 billion developing humans have been intentionally killed. As you can see, the vast majority of the world's population has been affected by this crisis. They have become victims of a sexual holocaust. The sexual holocaust is a multi-dimensional global crisis stemming from unrestrained sexual behaviors that have resulted in profound harm to humanity. Over the past few decades, we have seen a global shift towards anything goes sexuality. Anything goes sexuality is not new, but it started to gain influence in the United States during the 1960s and 70s. This was an era when sexuality was liberated from traditional restraints. After just one generation, we can now see the profound effects of anything goes sexuality. Unrestrained sexuality has affected all aspects of our humanity: the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. A single unrestrained sexual behavior can simultaneously create physical, emotional, social, and spiritual harm. The physical harm is the easiest for us to quantify through biomedical data. The emotional harm, which is more severe and longer lasting than the physical harm, is harder to identify because we carry those scars on the inside. The social harm is often justified as part of human nature and individual rights, and the spiritual harm is almost entirely ignored. These areas of humanity closely influence one another. Our perspective on sexuality profoundly affects our identity, our sense of guilt, and our definition of love. Our concept of identity, guilt, and love will affect our view on marriage, family, and children. The strength of our marriages, families, and childhoods affect how well we handle loneliness, rejection, and depression. Our emotional health will influence our actions and result in either fit or poor physical health. Our view of sexuality impacts the very fibers of society. If the sexual holocaust is the worst humanitarian crisis in human history, what are we doing about it? Until recently, not nearly enough. It's time we change that. Here are 3 ways that we can reverse this crisis. First, change should start with the individual. We are all responsible for our actions. We all need to learn how to appropriately restrain our sexuality so that we can live healthy lives. We need to be aware of victimizers and learn how to protect ourselves against those who want to exploit us. Next, it's going to take both me and you working together to create change. We need to respect and protect each other. We need to encourage each other to act responsibly and to protect each other from victimizers. We also need to help victims of the sexual holocaust begin to heal. Most of all, we need to protect the weak and the innocent. Finally, we have to hold all institutions accountable. Public institutions should not be promoting unrestrained sexuality. Instead, they should be helping the victims. The media, educational systems, and the government are some of the most powerful, influential victimizers. These institutions were meant for the public good, but instead, their agendas are systemically causing harm. These institutions need to be reformed and redirected. Our global society has been ignoring the effects of unrestrained sexuality for the past few decades. It's time we wake up and see that the sexual revolution did not lead to sexual liberation. It led to a sexual holocaust. We need to rise up. It's time for us to come out of this darkness and step into the light.